So if we look at our two processes, ultimately, we're going to start with the same thing. We're going to start with glucose, or food, every single time. If you go back, you'll notice that both steps, or both processes, begin with the step glycolysis. It's not until after glycolysis that they go their separate ways. So in this picture, both processes start with glycolysis, and then if there's no oxygen available, you're going to do fermentation, which is anaerobic, without oxygen, and there's no ATP made, no extra energy. That means that the only place that energy was coming from was glycolysis. Or, if there is oxygen, remember, aerobic with O2, all right, which is the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. It's going to take place in our mitochondria. We're going to get 36. So, in this case, we've got 38 total. In this case, our total is still just 2. So if we look at glycolysis, glycolysis is going to be the first stage in aerobic and anaerobic cellular respiration. All right? It's what comes out of glycolysis that's either going to move on to aerobic or anaerobic. And like we said, aerobic gives us 38 ATP total, anaerobic just 2. So if we split the word down literally, glyco is referring to lysis, and glyco referring to glucose, lysis referring to break or to break down. We've seen this portion of a word in a lysosome. Lysosome being an organelle that's responsible for breaking things down. All right. We also talked about it being a part of the word Lysol. Lysol being OL, an alcohol that breaks things down. Its job is to get rid of bacteria, right? Get rid of germs. So glycolysis is the breakdown of glucose. Taking place in the cytoplasm, like we said, what's going in is glucose. What's coming out are 2 ATP, 2 NADH. This should be very similar. We had an NADPH in photosynthesis. The one with the P goes with the word with the P. NADPH for P for photosynthesis. NADH is the temporary energy molecule in cellular respiration. Either way, both temporary energy. And then 2 pyruvate molecules are coming out. So, we got 2 main phases. Energy is going to be put in to kind of kickstart the reaction, right? And when we talk about kickstarting the reaction, I'm hoping that you guys are thinking, if energy is being input to kickstart, you should be thinking activation energy, the energy required to start a chemical reaction. So we're going to have energy put in to kickstart this reaction. It's going to create 2 3-carbon compounds, and then energy is going to be put out, right? What we're going to wind up with are 2 NADHs, 2 pyruvates, and 4 ATP, but we already put in 2. So, if we need to look at this in a picture form, right? When we talk about our picture form, we have our glucose. Glucose, remember, C6H12O6. In my drawings, I always tell you that when I draw you circles like this, the carbon. So we've got 1, 2, oops, that's not a different color. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons, C6. There are hydrogens and oxygens and everything bonded, but I'm not going to show you all of them. That's not what we're focusing on here. Energy gets put in. So our 2 ATP go in. That's that activation energy that I'm talking about. 2 ADP come out. You guys should know that ADP is the uncharged version. Right? Energy was put in and used, so we broke those phosphate bonds. And those 2 phosphates are going to join onto the end of the glucose. Then it's going to snap the glucose into 2. All right? The next thing, all right, is the energy output stage. So those 2 molecules that we just ended up with, NAD is going to come in. What you don't see here, all right, remember, C6H12. There's 12 hydrogens, O6, 6 oxygens. There's all sorts of stuff bonded to these carbons. Well, there's actually an H here and an H here, all right, for you guys to worry about. When the NAD comes in, it's going to pick up that H, all right? It's going to steal away that H and become NADH. NADH, that's our charged version of temporary energy. Same thing on the other side. But when that hydrogen disappears on both sides, it leaves a big empty space. Like, what's going to fit where the hydrogen was? That's where our phosphates are going to come in. We've got free-floating phosphates out in the cytoplasm, out in the cell. All right? They're going to come in, and they're going to take the place of that empty area. When they take the place of that empty area, you're going to end up with 2 molecules. All right? I like to tell you guys 2 poops. But now, we're trying to output energy. We're trying to get energy out of this. So we're going to have 2-ADP diphosphate, the uncharged version. All right? Each one of these is going to come up. 1-ADP is going to take that phosphate. 1-ADP is going to take that phosphate. And it's going to give us 2-ATP. Our 2-ATP, those are our big energy molecules. All right? Same thing on the other side. Take one phosphate, take the other phosphate, 2 energy molecules. And what you get are these 2 molecules that are called pyruvate. So, when we summarize glycolysis, right, whole goal is that we're going to break down glucose so that what we end up with can move on to the next step. Because let's face it, we didn't get a whole lot of energy here. So obviously, something is going to need to be done to continue the process. Happening in the cytoplasm, 2 pyruvates, 2 NADH, and 2 ATP. The 2 ATP might surprise you. But if you remember, with glycolysis, we had 2 ATP that went in and 4 ATP that came out. So what actually happened is we used 2 to get 4. So we went to -2 first, and then we gained 4, which really means we're only at +2. We've really only gained 2 ATP. We've actually made 4, but gained 2. All right? And the whole purpose of putting in those 2 ATP initially is that we're kickstarting the reaction for that activation energy. Again, another animation. This animation kind of shows glycolysis very nicely for you guys. And the next thing that's going to happen is that our pyruvate molecules are going to need to move on. Whether or not there's oxygen present, we should know. If there's no O2, we're going anaerobic. If there is O2, we're going aerobic. That should pretty much sum up glycolysis and the basic information that you guys are looking for to start out our 2 processes for aerobic and anaerobic cellular respiration. We'll go on from here.